All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We've got a lot of great information about the Design Engineering Master's program to share with you. Got some folks to introduce you to who are involved in the program. So let's go ahead and get started. And if we want to go to the next slide, we can do some introductions and I'll hand things over to Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Knowles, a professor of architecture at RISD. My research projects are in biofiber, bioplastic research and performance enclosure design. And I'm going to ask the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Rich.
I'm Friends. I'm the co-director. I'm on the Brown side. I'm a systems engineer by training. I spend a lot of time doing strategy and consulting, and love my ability to kind of watch magic happen between creative and analytical folks in Maine.
Griffin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Griffin Van Horn. My background is in biology. I am the technical instructor and maker in residence for the MADE program. So I like to say that I help MADE students bring their ideas to life.
And last but not least, Victoria.
Thank you so much. My name is Victoria Bray. I'm the Associate Director of Recruitment. I work with the Division of Masters and Professional Programs. I'm here to share some more information with you about Brown, master specific resources, and then I'll also be in the Q&A answering questions throughout the session.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So we've got about 45 minutes and 15 minutes for questions. Don't hesitate to drop a question in the chat, as Victoria just said. But we're going to go over some of the program highlights, the specific curriculum for the year program, some of our previous and current student profiles, and then Victoria is going to review the application process. Next slide, please. So Rich, you're on mute.
Of course I am. So take your cues off the better panelists than me. I think that what makes us unique and truly special is exactly what certainly I hope draws you to it, is that you get to draw the best of two different institutions. And they couldn't be more different in a good way. It allows you to draw on different perspectives. And we've got a slide that'll talk about faculty expertise, literally two different campuses, and bring them together in a way that if you're coming to us with a strong design background, you're going to leave with some analytical skills, which is not to say that design doesn't have those. If you're coming to us with strong engineering skills, you're going to leave with a very, very different perspective. These are jointly taught. Usually, or every time, we'll have a Brown faculty member and a RISD faculty member. The distinctions are less important, but really they're disciplines, as we'll talk about separately. We have an exponential approach where we gradually build upon ourselves, and it's a fun curriculum. And frankly, in 1 year, you get 2 master's degrees from world-class institutions that you know. I look forward to your Q&A. I'll just say that one important distinction, I think, if you start looking at various programs, is the degree to which we infuse tech, the degree to which we try to use experiential learning outside of the studio, and how the cohort itself is part of the learning process. We are definitionally small and I think extremely strong. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So basically, to back up your year here and to back up the curriculum, we've got some pretty fantastic resources between the two institutions. Obviously, the School of Engineering at Brown, the Brown Design Workshop, the RISD Museum, the RISD Nature Lab, which is pretty spectacular, and hopefully you'll get to visit if you choose to come and check out the campus. Obviously, the multiple departments between Brown University and RISD are pretty much open for you to take. And our last little moniker here, 2 times the friends. You'll not only meet great people in your cohort, but also friends across the 2 institutions. Next slide.
And going a little deeper, the power of collaboration, our values. We design with passion, humility, quality, and humanity. That's what you would expect from a place like Brown and RISD. That interaction, as I mentioned, it's palpable. I spent yesterday with our MAID cohort. Their creativity, their ability to conceptualize an idea and turn it into something, just like many of you have in your portfolios. None of this suggests that this concept is new to you. Some of you are very, very familiar with this. The question is, what does Brown, RISD, Brown add to your existing skill set? And as I mentioned before, it's the infusion of cutting edge research. And I don't say that, as a cliche. We bring in practitioners, we bring in deep thinkers, we have folks that have just launched books. So you are at the absolute inflection point of your learning. And then we do it in a collaborative way that is a lot of work. Truth in lending, if you're allergic to work, we either teach you to work or you go somewhere else, but it's a whole lot of fun. Next, please.
Awesome. The MAID program focuses on full collaborative design cycles, starting with gaining an understanding of real-world problems, performing research, prototyping, implementing, testing, iterating. We feel that having these full design cycles, design engineering cycles in the classroom are the best way to learn the methods that enable you to apply the design and engineering skills to the problems that you'll face in industry in your career. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the progression of the MAID core studios, starting with measure and make in the summer, generally at the beginning of July, where the design, the real world design cycles kind of start on a small scale with kind of boot camp style modules, then grow throughout the year to the crescendo in the spring, where we'll work on a semester-long collaborative project that will be displayed at the RISD grad show. I'm going to say collaborative, that's generally in small groups. All MAID students complete 3 2-credit core studio courses, design communication seminar that spans in the summer and in an immersive in the winter, and then 4 electives in 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring terms. Next slide, please. As Rich said previously, the MAID core studio courses are co-taught generally by faculty from Brown and RISD. Our faculty bring a wide range of expertise that we'll highlight in a minute. But the great thing is that all of those different faculty members focus on different areas of skill development, such as human-centered design, systems engineering, design research, high fidelity prototyping, and professional practice as you grow out into industry. Next slide, please. Then there are no formal tracks within the MAID program. But as students of both Brown and RISD, MAID students have the opportunity to use their electives to shape their journey throughout the program. So here are some examples of kind of informal arcs of electives that MAID students have taken in the past in engineering, data science, design, and you can read this list. It's a very broad range that reflects both the wide variety of courses that are offered between these 2 institutions and the wide variety of interests that our students have. And then on the right, we've kind of broken that out by specific subject matter arcs, such as environmental science, health, technology, and education. Okay, next slide, please.
Great. Thanks, Griffin. So we've talked about the purpose, like why do we assemble all these humans, both students and faculty? Griffin walked you through the process, right? These are the courses you can take. These are how they're nested in specific disciplines. I want to spend a minute talking about the people and then how they perform together. And I know this crew pretty well, and obviously with a small cohort, we know the cohort very well. I'm super biased. Not only are these people brilliant, and you can probably exclude the guy on the bottom left there, they are extremely dedicated to our cohort, and they're all so different. We are different personalities, different backgrounds, different disciplines. There's no sense in duplicating. There's very little duplication, but there's great overlap. And I'll give you some quick examples. I'll let you see the disciplines there. We have CEOs, we have full professors, we have practitioners, we have folks that started their own companies. RISD, Sojung is 20 years industrial designer, is chair. Jonathan is architect in deep understanding of how all of this connects. Chalky is, his bio is ridiculous. He's done a lot of things for one human. And we all come together in a collaborative way, in a way that I think each of us brings something to each of you. Everybody comes to our program for different reasons. You all have strengths and things that you want to, gap and get better at. And I think with our faculty, not only do they bring difference across sectors, public, private, nonprofit. This is not a happy accident. This is the dream team at both Brown and RISD. And in each of this, as I said before, builds upon each other. Let me go a little deeper, please. Next slide. So if you look at the how, the who, the what, right? The what is, these are the folks we work with, right? We work with municipalities. We work with centers on Brown. At RISD, we participate with and partner with the Brown, with the RISD Nature Lab. There is something that's just fascinating about the RISD campus. It just has a different look and feel to how they deliver education and how the studio feel. And then across, in addition to local organizations, you can look at that who's list, right? When NASA, I brought in classmates that are astronauts. People have worked for IDEO, Hasbro, GE Power, the Coast Guard, Harvard. We have a strong partnership with Harvard, whether it be for individual courses or partnering with their city, their institutions, or museums. Whatever your jam is, you're likely to find it. And you're likely to find it not on your own, but partnered with an amazing cohort where even within the cohort, you get to develop something that feels unique to you. Either you're building on something you're already expert on, or you're creating new knowledge that allows you to leave after a year with a lot more insight and a lot more skills that then you can translate into propelling you forward. I don't want to sound like a marketing pitch. Slide, please.
Just Rich, if I can tack onto that, one couple of the students in the current cohort are taking a studio with NASA at RISD, and it's RISD industrial design and fashion design, working on their suits. So it's pretty great synergies between departments, not only in RISD, but also between Brown and RISD.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jonathan. Look, as with anything, we're different. I think if Brown and RISD were the same, we would question why the value. But and if you look on the website for both schools, it's very unique. We don't have this type of collaborative partnership across every department, across every discipline, and it makes total sense. So this is our cohort, right? We're not very big, and you want us not to be very big. Don't get discouraged when you look at sort of, well, they're going to pick 25. Please apply. Let us do the hard work of building a cohort. And we're trying to build a cohort with different experiences, different backgrounds to strengthen, as I said, the faculty is only part of the equation, the cohort itself, which, as you know, once you leave Brown, yes, you can call us. We're service after the sale. But that cohort will be your friends and your colleagues and the people that help you problem solve into the future. Slide, please. Oh, sorry, back up. I apologize. I didn't build that slide properly. You can see the average age. That's exactly my age right there, 25.
Yep.
Um, right. So highly international, yet and that perspective is invaluable when you think about how we design for different cultures, different uses, different user experiences. And then you can see the backgrounds in consulting, manufacturing, media, technology, design shops. Some are trained designers from the best design schools in the world. Some of them are new to design but want to build on that schedule slide or that expertise. Slide, please. Thanks, Emma. Again, just more of examples. If we talk about what we did, who did it, where do they go? Well, they go everywhere, right? Walt Disney Imagineering. We're still waiting for the invites back to where they're all doing cool stuff. I'm sure they're coming. Again, it's an exciting prospect. I know there's a lot going on in the world, but to spend a year immersed in our studio and then know that you're armed with different skills than you had when you got there, and to go out and contribute at these great institutions is terrific. And some people just do their own thing. They either start a business or, take their pursuits at all the places you would expect them to work. Slide, please. Again, where they want to go. Slide, please. And I probably should have moved this up a little further. These are the type of projects and skills that not only do they gain, but they can demonstrate to an employer, right? And again, we want to make sure that you understand, and I know you do, this is a trade school. It's not just technical stuff. But the beautiful thing about design is it's both using your brain and designing something that you could palpably touch, or if it's a service that you could uniquely understand in a way that meets a whole lot of criteria. And you can see, for instance, there's a storybook, a video game, furniture, a biosensor. I happen to be up at Boston with my family to see our students present at the big Boston Tech Museum. Super popular, great instant feedback to our students at how they had creatively contributed to a big problem in Boston. So if solving tough problems with cool people, with occasional support and guidance from okay faculty interest you, you should consider coming. Slide, please. All right, again, different types of collaborations. We've said this different ways. Please make sure you take a look at that. You can see that there's airports on here, different examples. In the summer, just to get a little more specific, a little more granular, I teach with Monty in the summer and welcome the new cohort. We'll welcome you. Use gaming as a way to get you quickly hands-on experience into how decisions get made, how things get built, prototype development, and just get you a lot of repetitive opportunities to both understand your role and how you fit into the bigger design experience. And it's highly collaborative. It's a lot of fun. I mean, we're literally making and designing games. We're playing games. And we're trying to make sure that it is not us talking and you taking notes, which is not a model that works anywhere. Slide, please.
And I think Victoria is up.
I sure am. Thank you so much. So, lots of great details about the program. I'm here to help you learn more about Brown University in general and resources for our master's program. So, if we want to go to the next slide. So we're located in Providence, Rhode Island. A lot of the really great things that we've talked about today are by virtue of our location. So Providence is a small city on a river. A lot of other universities in the area, great proximity to other major cities in the Northeast. Very easy to get to Boston, easy to get to New York. Boston is just an hour and 15-minute train ride from Providence. You get free ridership on the MBTA as well as the RIPTA, the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority buses. So we try to make it as easy as possible to get around. Rhode Island's a pretty small state, so easy to get to the ocean. We're pretty well known for our excellent beaches, in my opinion, but also a really vibrant art community. We've talked a lot about RISD today. RISD definitely is part of what drives the art community in Providence. I know that this Saturday, RISD is putting on, I think as a part of their welcome weekend or their parents' weekend, a craft fair, so you can see what different makers are making at the college. So lots going on in Providence as well as a little bit further afield in Rhode Island and in the Northeast. If we want to go to the next slide. Here's a map of Providence. Having different neighborhoods makes it seem like we're really big and tough to navigate. In actuality, really small, small city in the smallest state in the country. But you can see the hearts over the different areas are the spaces where Brown University students tend to live and spend a lot of time. The majority of classes are on College Hill, although Brown has a pretty wide footprint in the city. So students live in downtown in the Jewelry District where our graduate student housing is, but then in apartments in Wayland Square, Fox Point, downtown, really areas like that. And then, of course, a lot of our students are centrally located in College Hill. The School of Engineering is also located in College Hill. So if you're looking to visit campus or poke around a little bit more in Providence, that's where you'll find us for the most part. Again, really easy access to the different neighborhoods, the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority buses, but also walkable, bikeable. We have bike shares, scooters all over the place. So it's pretty easy to get around and find a grocery store. So if we want to go to the next slide. We partner with centers and offices across campus to put on events through the Division of Masters and Professional Programs. So you can see what that looks like here. My office is the Center for Master Student Excellence, which is located in the Jewelry District in downtown Providence. We have study spaces for students. Our student affairs team also is housed there, as well as our career and professional development team. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can follow us, our master's account, to see what a day in the life might look like for you. But then we partner with folks across campus. So the Sheridan Center for Teaching and Learning is a great example. The Sheridan Center is an excellent resource. There's a writing center. They put on an English language program before classes start in the summer. Really just a good resource. Student health and wellness as well. If you need a doctor's appointment, you need to see somebody, but there's also counseling resources and things like that through student health, wellness services, vaccinations, really a one-stop shop for folks. And then other areas across campus that have spaces for you to gather, as well as student groups, identity-based groups, and things like that to really round out your time at Brown. So if we want to go to the next slide. I talked earlier about the Center for Master Student Excellence and the Division of Masters and Professional Programs. All of the master's specific resources are held in that office. So one of the things that makes Brown unique in the landscape of master's programs in the United States is we really focus on master's specific support. We have people who are dedicated to your success while you're here for your master's program and whatever your next step is, whether that's career or another degree like a PhD. So we've got academic resources, counseling, career programming. Obviously, of course, as I said earlier, we're partnering with folks across campus on a lot of these initiatives, but we're also here for you in times of need. We have dedicated staff who are there to support you if there's ever anything that you need, personal emergencies that come up, to help you navigate that. So if we want to go to the next slide. Career support and professional development, we definitely recognize that you are only here with us for a year in design engineering, which is not a lot of time. Really important that you're hitting the ground running in terms of professional development, and taking the next step after you graduate. So our team is here to help you with resume, cover letter writing, mock interviews, salary negotiations, helping connect you with folks across campus, alumni, helping connect you with companies that are here to recruit our students. So that's one layer of support through the Division of Masters and Professional Programs, but we're really all about layered support at Brown. So of course you can come and see us, but then you have wonderful folks in your program who have been in industry. We have professors of the practice, folks who are there to help you as well, sort of navigate your entry into industry after you graduate. We also have the Center for Career Exploration who puts on career fairs, where they're there to help you with recruiting as well. They'll host folks on campus who are there to recruit Brown University students. And then, of course, you have an active and engaged alumni base. One of the great perks of attending Brown University is that you are a lifetime member of our alumni and you have access to those alumni resources. So that includes an active and engaged alumni base for networking.
And Victoria, all of that is times two because we offer the same, all of this as being a Brown and a RISD student, all these services are there for you as well on our campus.
Exactly. So that's an important point. Thanks, Jonathan. Um, Really, whatever you need, I think that that's one of the great unique things about the design engineering program specifically is the services are tailored to the colleges and universities, and as a member of both, you have access to both. So career professional development as well as student affairs and student services. Thank you, Jonathan. So then if we want to go to the next slide.
Career services is a great resource.
Absolutely. And definitely one that everybody should be taking advantage of, especially on the Brown side. We have STEM specific career advising, but then I think that on the RISD side, there's just such a unique perspective that you get from folks in that field as well. So now let's talk through the application process. I know that there's lots of questions in the Q&A about optimizing your application. So let's go to the next slide and we can sort of dive into that. This is a very screenshotable high-level slide for folks who want to take something away from the presentation. We'll also share a recording after the fact. But I just want to take a look at the application requirements. We're going to require for you to submit transcripts. Anywhere that you've attended after secondary school, we want to see the transcripts. So if you attended a university and then transferred, we're going to want to see both sets of those transcripts if the grades aren't on one of them. And what's really important is that we're seeing all of the classes that you've taken and all of the grades that you've gotten in those classes. So your unofficial transcripts are fine for the purposes of your application. However, if you do end up matriculating at Brown, we will require you to follow up with an official version of your transcripts. If you attended an institution outside of the United States for college or university, then we will not require you to submit a credential evaluation with your application. We will require you to submit a credential evaluation if you end up matriculating, much like with your official transcripts. TOEFL and IELTS, those are the English language proficiency exams that we accept for anybody who does not speak English as their native language. We will waive that requirement if you have a degree from an institution where English is the sole language of instruction. We're going to require 3 letters of recommendation. We need all 3 in order for your application to be considered complete, so keep that in mind. I get a lot of questions. I have 2 letters of recommendation. They're really great. Can I have that third one waived? This is a Brown University policy. We have to have all 3 letters of recommendation. There's a portfolio component that's required for this program. We're going to do a whole session on the portfolio later on in this semester, so definitely keep an eye on your email to get invited to the portfolio session that's going to happen. But we'll also talk a little bit about the portfolio later on in the slides. Your resume, your CV, that'll help us understand your academic background as well as your professional background. Your personal statement, which is for us a series of short answer questions as well, really getting at your interest in the program, your goals as they pertain to the program, and then your interest specifically in Brown. And then we're also going to have you submit a video essay, which the details are in the application. It's really a series of questions that we're going to ask. So then if we want to go to the next slide. Diving a little bit more into the application requirements, we already talked quite a bit about the transcript. Again, your unofficial transcripts are fine for the purposes of submitting your application. You want to make sure that you're submitting that application by the deadline, so you don't have to wait for your official transcripts for that. Make sure that you're submitting them from all post-secondary degrees. English language proficiency, we only can accept the TOEFL or the IELTS to satisfy your English language proficiency requirement. Like I said earlier, if you have a degree from an institution where English is the sole language of instruction, you don't need to submit English language proficiency scores. For example, if you speak Spanish as your native language, but you have a degree from an institution in the UK, then that would be an example. If you have a degree from an institution where English is the sole language of instruction, we'd waive that requirement. A note about letters of recommendation. I've gotten questions about, how can I set my application apart? What are best practices? I think this is a really good example of an area that you have control over, that you can really sort of practice those best practices. Make sure that you submit all 3 letters of recommendation. You would be surprised at how many folks sort of remain incomplete for us and don't get a decision for that reason. So make sure that you're submitting all 3 letters of recommendation. Make sure that you're also submitting letters of recommendation from folks who know you really well. We get a lot of letters of recommendation for students that just simply say, this person was rated in the top 10% of my class, and that's all they can really say about that student. You should focus on folks who can really speak to you as a member of a classroom community, a professional community, somebody who's advised you, mentored you in some way. Those are really going to be the most impactful letters of recommendation. Give them your materials, your personal statement, the answers to your short answer questions, your resume, so that they can really speak to how successful you'll be in a graduate level program, and specifically a design engineering program. So if we want to go to the next slide. Lots of questions about the portfolio requirements. Again, we'll do a session on this. We also have some guidance that I'll drop a link to in the chat once I'm done. But 7 to 10 pages on a PDF. They should highlight 3 or 4 projects. Don't submit more than what's required because we can only commit so much time to each application. And I know that the admission team who's on this call, they are trying to sort of be equitable through the process. They can only spend so much time on each application. So make sure that you're following these instructions really closely. Do a maximum of 10 pages, a maximum of 4 projects, really quality over quantity where your portfolio is concerned. Some tips, an introduction, 1 or 2 pages about process, product description. If you have a website that you want to link us to, you're also welcome to do that and include that in your portfolio. If you have any questions, you're of course welcome to reach out to us. But anybody on the call who's reviewed portfolios want to add any words of wisdom about submitting a good portfolio?
Don't go over the limit.
There it is.
That,
I knew it.
Yeah, I think that if you have any more specific questions about, or you're looking for more specific guidance, we devote a whole hour to it in December. So definitely attend that, especially if you are coming from an engineering background. We see that on your portfolio, so we definitely know that we're not kind of evaluating it in kind of the same lens that we would a design portfolio. So don't be totally discouraged if you've never made a portfolio before, if you're coming from an engineering background. But we provide some tips on how to convey the story of your project, how to convey your unique design engineering lens on how you identified a problem, how you addressed it, kind of what the outcome was. I think that's kind of the most important part, is kind of for made portfolios is tell the story of the project, help us understand your thought process rather than just taking a beautiful high resolution image of 10 different things. It's really great to see kind of going in depth, highlighting who your collaborators were, or still are, what they brought to the table, what you brought to the table, what the outcome of this project was, whether what you're documenting is a looks like prototype where it's a rendering, or it's kind of a mock-up of you using this device, but it's not actually functioning, or we got this all wired up and it's totally functional, clearly indicating that. But just being very explicit about the details of the what we're looking at is important, and what the contributions were from your teammates.
Awesome. Thank you, Griffin. And I'll also drop a link to register for the portfolio information session that we're talking about, since we're going to spend a lot of time on that in December. For your personal statement and your short answer questions, I think that one of the most important things in terms of setting your application apart and following best practices is making sure that you're treating it like a writing sample. Make sure that it's a polished professional communication. Make sure that it tells us why you're interested in design engineering, why you're interested in Brown's program, what your goals are when you graduate. Those are all things that you should be hitting on, and then answering the questions completely in the application. If they're asking a question, making sure that you're actually answering the question that we're asking. So if we want to go to the next slide. Some contact information, some ways to check us out. I know that Made has a LinkedIn profile y'all are pretty active on. So if you want to learn more about what design engineering is up to, you can visit LinkedIn. I'm also going to share some email addresses for folks to be in contact with us after the session. But that being said, I know that there are some questions already in the Q&A, so I think we can go ahead and start to answer some of those. There's 2 questions about letters of recommendation and what the recommended distribution is of writers, professors versus supervisors. I know my general rule of thumb is if you're a recent graduate, so if you've graduated within the last 3 years, 2 should come from a faculty member who's taught you in an academic setting, or an advisor, and then 1 would be a professional letter of recommendation. But I'm interested, folks on the call, any other words of wisdom that you want to share in terms of asking for letters of recommendation?
Great. I'll take some of these if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Question was, prior students who had been in industry for a while, was their experience different? Of course. But not different bad, not actually even different. Oh, this is cake because I've been doing what I've been learning, uh, but different for sure. And I think that difference is what we uh, leverage. Somebody who's done it might still learn from somebody who is a little more theoretically angled, might learn a different approach. Sometimes doing it starts to calcify your thinking. So yes, their experiences, did make it different. And I think it's just about sort of figuring out that not everyone's going to have your experiences, both in terms of what they have or maybe what they're lacking, which is why getting along with the cohort is so, so important. It's not absolutely required that you love all 25 people. You should like all 25 people. And I guarantee you're going to love a bunch of them. But it's just common sense. But I appreciate the question. Anyone else want to take another one?
Yes, I saw one about coming in with a specific project in mind. I can't find it right now, but I think absolutely it's a bit of a balance of, I think that if it is a kind of, if we were to ask you, what would you do? What are the kind of the three projects that you would want to work on if you were, if you were a MAID student? Kind of having a clear answer to that, being able to hit the ground running and really dive in and be a self-starter, that's really important. And that's absolutely something that we look for. I think kind of the flip side of that is if it is, oh, this is exactly what I'm going to do, this is the one thing I want to do, and I can do it all by myself, then then it's then I encourage you to do that all by yourself. But it's being able to leverage um, leverage all the intelligences in the room and being able to identify collaborators and understand, I'm working on this thing, I want to be able to push it to the next level. And if I had, the opportunity to collaborate with an industrial designer, a manufacturing engineer, then I could really push it to the next level. And having flexibility, because as you start collaborating with these people, you may realize, actually, if we get all of ourselves in the room, there's a different project that we could address, and not just being absolutely married to one idea that's really keeping you up at night. But being able to work on a variety of briefs where you have specific constraints, and you're not going to be disappointed that you're not getting to work on the one thing you really do. But absolutely having some ideas of, yeah, if I were, if I had 11 months to start working, I could hit the ground running. That's absolutely something that we're looking for.
Victoria, there was a question about presidential scholarship at RISD, and I don't know the answer to that. Did you answer that or someone?
I did. I added the blurb from our program finder page about funding for the program, which is that the program offers a limited amount of need-based funding through the FAFSA and the CSS profile, depending on where students are coming from in the world. But nothing about the presidential scholarship. I haven't heard that students are eligible for that, just the funding through the program.
So that's a great question, and I will
Yeah.
look into that and get an answer back to whoever wrote that.
Thank you.
I think there's a question about what's the ideal, and like in most things, the ideal is that you're smart and you work hard. Your background is what your background is. So it isn't the case that we lean toward engineering or we lean toward design. We're building a cohort. We're not going to get 25 engineers and one designer. That doesn't make sense. So I think it's a balance. Also, just be confident. Somebody asked a question like, hey, should I use my essay that I used last year if I'm reapplying? Sure, unless you think it was a bad essay. It's such a small cohort that I wouldn't take from that, oh, I wasn't admitted, something must be wrong with me or my essay, or no, not at all. We purposely try to keep it small. It's very difficult. These are very hard choices. So if you want to resubmit, and you're comfortable with it, right? That's what I don't know. Like, so that's my answer to both of those. Any other?
We've gotten a few questions about, taking classes, cross-disciplinary classes. And one of my roles as co-director with Rich is to help the cohort get into RISD classes. And they are available. The only caveat, two caveats, is one, if you're accepted, you should start looking early. And two, not all RISD studios are open because they're reserved for core, or they're machine based or something, and they're limited capacity. So it's really important to have your interests in RISD courses ahead of time, and that's my job to help you get in. I hope that's clear.
Couple questions about housing for graduate students, which I can share information about. So I know through Brown University, we do have a limited amount of graduate housing available on a first come, first served basis. You can't do anything about housing until you've been admitted and enrolled in the program. So the timeline would be, if you're admitted in early spring, we would generally release decisions. The final decisions get released in early March. You would enroll and then you would get on a graduate housing waiting list. We have apartments available in College Hill as well as in the Jewelry District, but again, limited first come, first served basis. The earlier you enroll, the sooner you can get on housing wait list. So that's just a tip from me if you're admitted to the program.
Could you guys back up to the slide that had the 8 pictures of student projects on it?
That would be slide 16.
Might be able to.
Emma,
If not,
still
I
on?
might be able to share my. Oh, here we go.
Victoria, there's a question after this, about the priority round, um, about commitment to the priority round. Maybe you could answer that.
Yeah, definitely. So I know I've gotten a couple questions about committing. So for the priority round, it's not like early decision like when you apply to an undergraduate institution where you're committed to attending if you're admitted. By applying by the priority round, you get your decision earlier so that you can enroll earlier and you can start to take steps to move to Providence sooner, like getting on housing wait lists and things like that. So it's not that it's binding. I will say that for this program, space is limited. We have a pretty firm ceiling on how many students we can enroll. So that's something to keep in mind as part of like navigating this as well. Applying in that priority round, you get your application in earlier, you can get admitted and enroll sooner.
Sorry, I cut you off, Griffin, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I see there are a couple of questions. Describe a typical project in the core studios. Are they very prompt heavy? Are they more self-managed? And then are there corporate partners the students have made projects with? So here are a couple of example projects. I think these are all from the summer and the spring. So they kind of show kind of the start of the May journey and the culmination of it. So the ones up at the top, this is a recycled recycled fabric into a sheet, a bio-friendly sheet material. These students actually wrote a paper or an application and they created a poster and brought this to a international conference. Maybe Rich or Jonathan remembers the name of that conference, but brought that to a conference in France. They got accepted and they got to display their work internationally. These two projects in the middle were the one on the left is from a game design boot camp. The one to the right is from an AI, kind of a use of AI and doing a deep dive into kind of navigating AI generation children's book project. One on the top right is another biomaterials project. Then on the bottom, here's some examples of, or the bottom 3 on the left are RISD grad show project. So Chromacom used computer vision and transparent OLED displays to kind of provide selective shutters for ADHD. this one in the middle of the bottom left was a RISD grad project, but it also was displayed at the MIT Museum at an event, the MIT After Dark event. Then the bottom right is a really exciting one because that was part of a data visualization project that was a cooperative project between the Harvard Berkman Klein Center, um, Other Tomorrows, and the city of Boston, their data team, where they provided city data to the students, to Harvard and Brown students, and they collaborated to display their work at the Museum of Science, which was a really exciting project. That's kind of one example of a sort of an industry partnership that was put together, and we've done kind of other simulated client projects in the past that changes every year. But here, just kind of an example of some of the projects and some of the outcomes, and this kind of subtext under each project name is the backgrounds of the students that collaborated to build that project. So that just kind of shows you the diversity and kind of what we can achieve through interdisciplinary collaboration. So I think it's sorry if that took a second, but I think it's just kind of important to highlight those what some of the types of projects that our students worked on are.
Rich, there's a question saying, could you share a typical day schedule for the program? I kind of like that question. I'm wondering if either Griffin or Rich can talk about like tomorrow.
Yeah, let's let me take that one on, Griff. And we'll have slightly different takes. There is no one day that's like the other. This is what I love. There's nothing formulaic. Once there is usually some bit of core instruction, right? It's not sort of build a bear, you're sitting in the studio not sure what you're doing. So there's some concept that we introduce, something we reinforce, something we circle back. But then there's a period where it's like, if there's a run, it's a release run where you're off with your team, you're off with your group, or you're off on your own going deep. We frequently come back together. This is a program where you have to be comfortable sharing with others what you're thinking. None of us are mind readers. I don't think your future employers are mind readers. I don't think the people you're designing for are mind readers. So while this isn't a skills class that we're just going to make you expert speakers, we're not. You're probably already expert speakers. So a typical class would be, for instance, yesterday, as we walk through how to take an idea to more than idea. Yesterday, we were looking at what are the various steps that you need to design and implement to feed yourself, right? Chopsticks, spoons, whatever that thing is, right? And it could be something that simple. That is to be able to sort of stretch yourself and realize that everyone's going to have a different take. Everyone's going to have a different perspective. Everyone's going to have a different idea. And then quickly, rapidly prototype, iterate, and make it better. That would be one snapshot. Concurrent to that, there is an overarching project, maybe a term project, maybe a short-term project, maybe a project that's doing 2 weeks, while simultaneously you have a big group project that you're also doing. So the studio requires you to shift gears. It's a lot of work. What I love about MADE students is it's not us pushing them, right? On the contrary, we're kind of pulling on them a little bit like, hey, sleep is a thing. You should go get some. Right? You are going to be better when you balance all of these great ideas. Because the program is a year long, they feel super anxious to be able to take every class under the sun, commute to Harvard, get on an airplane, go to Stanford. I made that up. Take a course at RISD. All of these things that are of interest to them, you've got to learn how to prioritize. And I think they do a very, very good job of it. The last, if you said, what is a day like? I'm not just saying this, I should probably video them. They have fun. They like each other. They're doing fun stuff. And that's, I think, the magic of the program. Hopefully that was helpful to you all. Other questions? Let me get on the Q&A. Victoria, do you want to tee up a few of those in case we missed any?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just had answered a question that I think bears saying out loud since 6 people upvoted it, but question about for folks who have more of a design background, how much of a technical background do they need to have, or do they need to make sure that they highlight in their application to be successful?
All I'll take that if you don't mind, Jonathan, and then you could provide a completely complimentary or no, disregard what Rich just said. And that's the beautiful thing, right? You know, I'm going to segue for a second. I taught with Paolo, who's an industrial designer. He happens to be from Italy. We couldn't have been more different. And I love that students would ask us a question and we'd both give them very different answers, right? Of course you do 1, 2, 3. And he's like, no, 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 no. You do ABC, right? So here's my take. You know, I think you got to do more than like just page numbers, right? If math just makes you throw up, that's okay. But you have to do some analysis. We don't dive deep into calculus differential equations. You do get an engineering degree, right? It depends on how you spell out made. Is it a master's of arts in design engineering? Is it a master's of, you know, just somewhere in there, the word design engineering is at your graduation, which I attend. There's a big sign that says design engineering, and there's a word there called engineering. So you got to do some of it. I would say that what I tell the cohort is, as soon as you get past this hurdle that thinks that engineering is math for the sake of math, or, you know, data for the sake of data, it's not. Engineering is just problem solving. Everyone on this call right now is a problem solver. We want to give you something other than a hunch, your gut instinct, to be able to solve problems, to be able to apply a systemic way to make decisions on what product you make, whether you don't make it. That is engineering. So I wouldn't be worried that there are massive courses. Plus, we give you a lot of flexibility. Your electives, if you really think your math that you want to get, you know, there are people taking computer science courses, there are people taking data courses, there are people taking math courses. A little of this is on you to kind of regulate what you think you need. But in terms of the core, it's not anything that should be a burden for you to consider not applying because the word engineering is in the program. But I will tell you, if you think about engineering and you read problem solving, you're going to be fine. Jonathan, your take on that?
I'm going to give a little bit of a long-winded answer, about Brown and RISD's relationship. We have had a long-standing deal where students can take classes at each institution. What's unique about this program, it's formalized that into a one-year graduate program, and which is pretty great because you can concentrate on the best of both worlds. But to give an example, before the MADE program exists, I've worked with the Brown Design Workshop to design a Stirling engine-powered house. And I guess the important thing is we actually built it. So engineering students were involved with the Stirling engine, but they were also involved in the proportions of the enclosure to make it work. And similarly, our students here in architecture were involved in the size and the components and actually the milling of the Stirling engine. So that's kind of the ethos of this program, is that cross-disciplinary work where actually you make something with your hands. So that's I don't know if I contradicted you, Rich, but I wanted to highlight the making aspect of the program.
Yeah, there's no contradiction there, but certainly a different perspective. One of the things we will teach you is we could all stare at the same thing, and depending on your background, experience, perspective, or your perceived definition of the problem, we're going to come at it in a different way. If Jonathan and I answered the same, one of us should not be on this call, and then we just trade off. Like, I'll be on the next one, right? Optimize our time.
Go ahead, Griffin.
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of have the, you know, to have the desire to kind of cross that bridge. But I think the most challenging thing for MADE students is the sheer volume of opportunities you have in different directions you go, and areas where you can push your skills. And I think the most important thing is recognizing and embracing your unique lens and understanding that the reason why that we put such a wide variety of students in the same room is so you guys can collaborate and you can identify and leverage each other's skills, and you can learn from each other, and you can take engineering classes or you can take design classes, and you can push your skills to kind of better synergize and you know, build skills in a different area, but not necessarily looking for, you know, as an industrial designer, you're not going to become an engineer, you know, an electrical engineer in 11 months. And we can't promise that you're going to do that. You can't achieve that even if we promise it. But kind of understanding how to develop shared languages, leverage the skills of everybody else as you collaborate. I think that's kind of the most important thing. But definitely seeing people that are already trying to cross that bridge, or already succeeding in crossing that bridge, and wanting to take it further, and build their own unique lens at the same time.
There's a question about research during the program. And again, I can give an example. You should know that the MAID program is demanding. Rich already outlined that it's not crazy demanding, because sleep and health are a priority, but it is a demanding program and a demanding schedule. But there are opportunities for research. A student from last year is working with one of my colleagues here in the architecture department on a grant. So I introduced the two, and she's currently working on a large grant proposal with faculty here at RISD. So those opportunities do exist.
Another question about sort of building a diverse cohort and what the ethos is around promoting diversity and equity and inclusion in the program. And I think you guys have spoken a lot to like professional backgrounds, age of the cohort, and things like that. So I'm not sure if there's anything else folks want to add there.
Yeah, I'll take a quick stab at it. RISD and Brown are incredibly inclusive. If we looked at diversity just mechanically, we'd say, we need to get a bunch more old people in there, right? That 25 number is bad. And I say that jokingly. I think we have the correct disciplinary diversity, the correct cultural diversity. And the reality is we don't know who's going to apply, right? So it all factors into our decision. But I think at the core of that question is, do we celebrate differences? Yes. We celebrate, we have quiet people, we have a lot of people, we have people from all different backgrounds, perspectives, disciplines. It is my favorite part of MAID, that you have these very unique collaboration of humans. And I think it means your designs are better. I think it means you teach each other things that you wouldn't otherwise consider. So I should have just said, yes, we're immensely interested in diversity. Yes, we're immensely interested in inclusion. Certainly not, and this is not intended to be contentious, not at the expense of quality. And every year we have more quality than we can admit. So I hope that conveys what we're trying to do in MAID.
So I think we just have time for one more question. Folks, you have the highest scholarship level for the upcoming cohort. Question asked, what's the maximum amount of financial support that they could receive?
Yeah. And what's the answer?
I don't have that answer.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if there was an update for the upcoming cohort. So we can get back to folks with that after we regroup for
And
sure.
same with the RISD scholarships.
Yeah.
I can follow up on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. And then the last question, since we're right at time, how heavily do you weigh different materials as a part of the application process? Example, GPA and portfolio.
I think it's all of a piece, frankly. I don't think we don't have like 20%, 30%, 50%. We evaluate everything.
Go ahead, Griff.
No, go for it.
I think if you want to increases your chances of coming here, you should try to strive to have all of those be not negative. But we're not so laser focused that we try to look at the whole person. Maybe you have a lot of work experience and you peaked later. Don't not apply because your GPA is a 4.0. We're not doing that, right? All of you have a story. Give us a little credit that we're going to look at your story. If you have a great story and you have a 1.5 GPA, that's good, but you're not coming here, right? And I don't say that, well, I do say that jokingly, right? I'm just saying, put together the best application you can, figure out if this is the right place for you, and give it your absolute best shot, and give us credit that we're going to try to build the best cohort we can, and we hope that includes you all.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. Could you just real quick, could we scroll back to the slide? I think somebody in the chat missed the slide where we showed the electives. I'm trying to figure out which I can pull up which slide number that is, but maybe they can just take slide 10. Maybe they can just take a screenshot of it before, if they want to see some examples of our electives. I think it was just like one. Yeah, that's it. That's it right there. Yeah. So whoever asked the elective question, these are some example elective names. And you can, the course catalogs are online. You can look up,
Exactly.
the details about those courses.
Of course, yeah. I mean, the RISD, for instance, the spring options are going to be released next week. So that will be updated if you want to sort of see. And certainly the fall courses are online right now.
And just one last thing about the applicants and balancing the different sections. We're looking for people that we, have amazing skills and we can see ourselves working with in a room for 11 months. And just focus on conveying the story of yourself, your unique lens of how you approach these problems, through your portfolio, through your application materials. Just don't focus on just like highlighting how amazing these things that you've created are. Tell us the story of who you are, how you think, how you collaborate, how you solve problems, and that'll come through in the application.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you
Victoria.
all. This has been wonderful.
Emma.
Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Good
Bye.
luck.
Bye, friends. Good luck.